Let's face it, you know you're stressed. We're all stressed. Let's talk about something else, right? But what if the very thing that you're using to reduce your stress is actually causing you more stress? That glass of wine, your favorite meal, your exercise. We think we know stress, but this episode with Dr. Torkil Færø actually helps us take a deeper look into what it is that's actually causing us stress. He's going to share with us his insights from his book, The Pulse Cure, where he talks about utilizing the wearable technology that we're already using to collect data in an insightful way that allows us to understand what's actually going on in our life, what is causing us stress every moment of every day, so that we can better make decisions that are going to help us reduce stress, avoid stress, and ultimately get back to a recovery state that allows us to perform at an even better level. So listen in as Dr. Færø tells us about what's stressing you out, and even more importantly, what you can do about it. Dr. Færø, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you about stress. I know most of us have it, and if we don't, we're dead. So I'm looking forward to diving into you a little bit more. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Lucas. Great to be here.
Absolutely. So I want to hop right into it. One of the things that I'm really curious, because you talked a lot about stress, and I think a lot of people understand the sentiment. It's not good for us. It can kill us, yada, yada. But what have you learned about stress since starting this journey that you didn't know prior to the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, that would be more or less everything. So what I thought about stress was not the total picture. What I immediately realized started when I started tracking my heart rate was that the stress came from surprising sources, from food, from alcohol, from if I was eating chili. I was surprised of how much an intense workout, how long it could last. But the main surprise, I think, that was been the food, because I was expecting not to see that I was stressed, because mentally I'm almost never stressed. So I was just expecting to see a really calm, harmonic picture of the stress balance, but it proved to be totally wrong. And I was stressed almost all the time. I spent a long time, maybe close to 2 years, trying to detangle the stress that I was reading from my wearable at the time. And it was nicotine, alcohol, it was food, gluten, things containing chili, mustard, all these surprising things. So it turned out that my system was stressed. And of course, so many other people will realize that as well when they start tracking their heart rate variability. And probably you have gathered some surprising stress sources as well, I would guess, on your Garmin watch.
Yeah, I remember when we first introduced each other and first met each other, the first thing you said, "Is that a Garmin watch?" And I was like, "Yes, it is." And we started to talk a little bit more about it. And I can't wait to dive into that a little bit. But I want to give people just a little bit of an overview of what we're talking about here today, because some people understand that stress, there's different types of stress, and that some stress is good, some stress isn't. Some other people are like, stress is horrible and I never want to have any of it. And you and I both know that that's very unreasonable to suggest or to imply. So can you give everybody listening at home kind of a 30,000-foot view of, when you think of stress, what are you really talking?
When I'm talking about stress, I'm talking about in a broad sense that the load on our body that will stress our heart, so that stress becomes visible in the heart rate. And that can be, as you say, good or bad. Or it can be, I would rather say it can be useful stress or useless stress. So the useful stress will be something that will build you stronger in the long term, but that will be a stressor in the short term. Just like exercise, like doing a presentation, by doing a mental or physical challenge of any kind, that in the long run you need it to become more resilient and become stronger. What I would call useless stress is eating food that you cannot tolerate, junk food, food that you will react to, that you maybe have an intolerance to or a low tolerance to. I will just sap you of your energy and not give you anything back. Alcohol, I would say, in the same category, although at some, in some circumstances like weddings or birthdays, or it can be have some good sides to it as well. But in general, the alcohol in itself will just take energy away from you. The same thing with nicotine and so on. So even stress that you would consider bad, or unwanted stress that you didn't want to have, can also in the long term be good, because you can grow from that as well. So maybe the biggest thing that you can grow the most of is things that happen to you that you really didn't want to happen to you, but you had to rise to the occasion and overcome it, and that made you stronger, even if you would choose not to be in that situation in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of people that listen to this show, they're high achievers. They're always constantly wanting to better themselves in some way. And so when they hear stress or they hear yeah, when they hear stress, it's not really something that they want, but they do want that idea of growth, and they do recognize that something that I believe in is the only way to grow is through some sort of discomfort. Typically, where we're in a comfort situation, we're not growing too much. But I think there is a way that you can recognize stress for the benefit of it, right? We both know the concept of eustress, which is the beneficial, versus distress, which is the non-beneficial, which I think you're hinting at here a little bit, but there's probably a lot more nuances that you've learned over the years. But I think that that's really important to recognize is there's a certain point where stress is no longer beneficial to you, no longer helping you in some way. And it's really important to be able to differentiate between those two things. And so that's what, so for those that are listening and can't see, I'm holding up the book by Dr. Færø, the Pulse Cure, which is a phenomenal book. I had a chance to listen to it and I loved it so much. I bought a copy of it because I wanted to have it in my hands. But that's what I loved about your book was that it was realistic to the idea that stress is important. It's real. It's pervasive. It's not necessarily something you can get rid of, but you have to recognize that it can be of good and of bad. So when you were doing your study and learning more about this, what did you start to find? Or actually, the question I had for you is, what got you into wanting to study this to begin with? You talk about it in the book, but I'd love for you to share if you're willing.
Yes, the first time I heard about heart rate variability as a measurement of stress, because what the beautiful thing is that your heart rate will make stress visible. So you can measure the degree of stress so that you can balance it better. But the first time I heard about this was I was reading a book by Bessel van der Kolk, The Body Keeps the Score, which is a great multi-million bestseller from the psychiatrist Bessel van der Kolk. And he was talking about how in psychiatry they were using heart rate variability to assess the patients in the psychiatry ward, whether they were available for treatment or not, mentally. And if their heart rate variability was too low, they were too stressed, they would wait until the HRV became better. So then I learned that about the concept of heart rate variability. Shortly thereafter, I became aware that we have ECG monitors that can track heart rate variability. So for 2 years, I used that system myself. And then after a couple of years, then I understood that the Garmin watches have the same system in their watches. And that makes it, of course, much more accessible to everybody, both because it's easier and cheaper and less cumbersome to deal with a watch. So then I understood that this is like having a dashboard to your physiology at your wrist so that you can be in control of your stress level, at least to a degree that would be impossible without these measurements, because the heart rate will reveal the kind of hidden sources of stress. And I would say it's like an iceberg. Only kind of 1/10 of the stressors in your life are visible and obvious to you. And most of the stressors are not visible to you, but you will see it in the heart rate. And even though there is something that you understand is stressful, the degree and how long it will last can also be very surprising to you, even though you knew it was a stressor.
Mm. Absolutely. So you mentioned in the book the idea of like the Whoop straps and the Aura rings and things like that. When I first started getting introduced to HRV, when I got a Whoop, because I was in health and fitness for a number of years, and it was shocking how much just having a beer or a glass of wine before bed drastically destroyed my HRV and my ability to recover the next day. And you put it so eloquently, this idea that, alcohol is a toxin and it's a stressful thing to clear out toxins from your body. So that was really insightful. Could you, for us for a second, Doctor, HRV, when people hear heart rate variability, I think a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot of people, some people, rather than dive in, think, oh, heart rate variability, your heart rate goes up and your heart rate goes down. And that's not quite what we're talking about here. Could you explain it to, I like to say, if you can't explain it to a second grader, you don't know it well enough. So could you explain it to a second grader? And that'll actually be beneficial for me, what heart rate variability is.
Yeah, so heart rate variability is the variation between heartbeats. So the heart doesn't beat like a metronome all the time. So we can see, I have to then start at the autonomic nervous system in our body. The autonomic nervous system is the foundation in our brain, and it's an ancient system. It's something we share with vertebrates and mammals. It's like 300 million years old, and it still functions pretty much in the same way it always have functioned. So this is divided into the sympathetic fight, flight, and freeze state, and the parasympathetic rest and digest state. And the heart will beat differently whether they are in the stress state or in the relaxed state. In the relaxed state, when we breathe in and the lungs fill with oxygen, the heart rate goes up. And when we breathe out and there is less oxygen, the heart rate goes down to save a little bit of energy. But when we are in the stress state, then the heart beats just like a metronome, whether we are breathing in or out. It's like this organism, it's like this ancient system regards this organism needs to survive the next moment, and then afterwards we can relax. So that is how, when the heart beats very steady, we are in the stress state. When it beats with the variation between the heartbeats, going up when we breathe in, down when we breathe out, that's in the relaxed state. And there's, of course, a degree from the very deep relaxed state until the very, very stressed state. And the wearables keep track of this while we are busy living our lives. So they will keep track, round the clock, and give you an assessment of whether your stress balance is compatible with health or not. Is this a sustainable lifestyle? So, for example, if you're a business leader and you have a stressful day, and then you go home and have a late night pizza with a glass of alcohol, then you have less forces available for the next day. Not because of the stress at work, but because of the late night pizza with the glass or two of alcohol. And when you are able to see the stress levels of this, you are able to take away the unnecessary stress factors so that you only focus on what can give you something in return.
Yeah, I think that's great. And that was one of the things that I really loved about your book was it explained, for one, heart rate variability. I've heard that explained a dozen different ways, but your book was so insightful in helping us understand that when your body is stressed, it thinks it's having to fight or flight. And so the best way to make sure it's ready is to constantly be pumping nutrients, resources to the muscles and to the various things, systems that it needs to be ready for that. That's why it pumps consistently versus when you're in a more neutral and relaxed state, it can vary. It can throttle up and throttle down, and it can do so in a very thoughtful way. Well, thoughtful, it's subconscious, but it's autonomic, right? But it can do so in a very clear and concise way. And I think that that's so helpful. And for those listening at home, your heart rate variability is measured, correct me if I'm wrong, doctor, in milliseconds. And that's kind of the number that you get with a lot of these different devices.
Yeah, so it gets measured in milliseconds. That will be the variation between the heartbeats. So that say that you have a 50 millisecond difference, that will mean that the difference between the heartbeats will be maybe 500ths of a second. So it's a small difference, but you can feel it if you put your fingers to your carotid artery and you are very rested in the morning, for example. You can feel this slight difference on the in-breath and the out-breath. And the problem with this and why it's so useful is that when we are in the stress state for too long, then our immune system will not work properly. So we are made to stress in short bursts at a time and then to relax. When we put these wearables on hunter-gatherers that still exist today, they are in a moderate or light activity 3 hours a day. And the rest of the day, they are relaxed. They are not totally just sleeping, lying on the ground, but they are in a relaxed state most of the time. And we, of course, in our modern world, tend to be somewhat stressed all the time. And then when in addition to that, you have alcohol, you have food we don't tolerate, and we have a lack of sunlight, and we have toxins, and you're too comfortable, as you say, maybe regarding temperature, we're in a room temperature all the time, then that is not good for our physiology. So that means that we are stressed. Many people will also be metabolically challenged. So they will have metabolic syndrome. That means that they are overweight. They are having a too high blood sugar and too high blood pressure and so on. And that will also be a stress on the system. They will be underslept. So if you don't sleep those 7 to 8 hours a night, then that will also add to the stress balance, really.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so what I loved about your book is it took all of this information and this knowledge and it said, okay, now what? And that as a coach, that's really important to me, right? It's one thing to just know that these things are happening, but it's another thing very much to talk about, okay, so now what do we do with it? And so I think it's, for one, I think anybody who can check out the Pulse Cure, it would be a phenomenal insight into just what stress is and how it bothers us. But you talk a lot about these ideas of the differences and how people manage stress and how they handle it, what things are happening in their day that are causing it, and what things that, and then even more importantly, and we'll get to this later on in the show, is okay, now what to do about it. And I definitely want to share my story and what I learned from my Garmin watch after you encouraged me to do so. And I listened to your book. I'd also love to hear you share your story a little bit, because you do so in the book. And I think it's important for people to realize that you're not just a doctor talking about it. You have also lived it. And I think that's great. But before we even do that, what would you say is something that you found in your research that people are stressing out about, that they don't? We all know that the work and the job and the relationships, those are stressful things, but what is it that you maybe found that people were stressing that they didn't even realize was putting a stress load on their bodies?
The biggest one there would be food. Yeah. So people are surprised by how particularly ultra processed food can affect their system. Often it's because of bakery goods, flour-based food, bread, pizza, those kind of things that will give them a stress levels that they did not know about. And then they change that. They both change what they eat towards something that they can see that they tolerate better, but they would also change the times of the day that they eat. They will see that you probably have found as well that if you have a late night meal, and by that I mean after 3 hours before you go to bed, that will also affect your stress levels way into the night. So that would be the surprise for most people. I don't think I've heard anyone not being surprised by that. The other surprise is the extent of the stress levels of alcohol, and even just one glass or two, how much it will stress them. What have you found in this area?
Yeah, exactly that. The alcohol I already knew just from my Whoop, and Whoop does a lot of blogs and articles and things like that. And they even ask you questions like, did you drink any alcohol last night? Things like that, so you can start to track your habits. And I think we'll definitely talk about the best tools to start to track if people are interested in doing this. And I highly recommend that they do for a little bit. But food, alcohol was one I had already kind of known, but food was definitely one that I recognized a little bit more. I had already understood the basic premise of metabolic condition, a metabolic syndrome, and the effects of processed carbohydrates on the body, low-grade inflammation, gut health, all of those things. But I hadn't quite fathomed the effect of it on the levels of stress. And the timing was definitely one. The amount of food, so eating a large meal can also, like, the larger the meal, the more stress your body can go through in order to be able to digest that. I hadn't realized that. But it's ironic because there's a book, and I'm going to grab it here because I have it right behind me. I'm holding up a book called Ikigai, and it's all about the
Great
food.
book.
Have you read it? Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, wonderful.
So in the Japanese culture, you're familiar then with the term hari hachibu.
Yeah.
Yep. And so I
The,
know I butchered that for sure, but the idea of you only eat until you're 80% full. It's ironic that this book that had no scientific, or the book has some scientific backing, but that concept in the Japanese culture definitely didn't come because they did a bunch of research on the levels of stress due to heart rate variability. They just knew that it wasn't healthy for you to eat past being full. And so Hari Hachibu, which is a very Eastern based kind of cultural philosophy, don't eat past being 80% full. They say, that's kind of arbitrary as terms of a number, but don't stuff yourself. It's ironic that you found a very similar case, but with hardback science.
yeah, and that is a problem if you have all you can eat offers at your restaurant, for example, to limit yourself just to one plate only and not to eat everything that you can. So, but once you see it on your monitor, it becomes easier to resist the temptations when you see the result and when you know the result afterwards. So just today, for example, I was going for a run in the morning. That was quite hard. But the harder thing was in the afternoon for me because I ate 4 slices of bread. because that was the only thing we had in the house. We'd just been on an Easter holiday. But that stress was even worse than going for a quite hard run. And I could feel it also in my body, and it would last for hours. And it's okay. It just reminds me again that I shouldn't eat those slices of bread. It's not good for me. I feel a little bit like I have the flu. And I can just see it exactly on the monitor, and this will show that my heart rate is maybe raised by 20 beats, and it will remind me the next time that okay, you don't need this. Stay away from it and have a salad instead, or don't eat. So fasting also is something that you can see on your watch. That will be, even though you can feel hungry, for your body is a better state to be in for for a long time. So maybe if you do the intermittent fasting or restricted eating window, maybe you eat from 11 a.m. until 7, and the rest of the time you don't eat. So that's my usual eating pattern that I have found suits me, and I can see it on my watch as well, that I will be in the parasympathetic restful mode when I'm not eating.
Yeah, yeah. And that's something I think that was enlightening and helpful for your book, is this idea that it can feel like you're not stressed out. It can feel like everything is fine, but then these numbers can help you it kind of tells a different tale. And sometimes, we talked about this off air, sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not great. You don't want paralysis by analysis. You don't want to be like, oh, my watch says I'm only 50%, so it's going to be a horrible day. It's like, no, you could still probably have a good day. But the alternative, I think, is true, which is you could think everything is fine until the numbers help you recognize that maybe they're not. And our bodies are extremely resilient up into a certain point. And unfortunately, that point is when we're 50 or 60, and all of a sudden we realize we have metabolic syndrome and nothing's working the way it should. But it's kind of that death by 1,000 cuts. We didn't realize it till it was too late. Before we talk a little bit about utilizing these apps, and again, your story and mine will be shared, but what might you say to people to help them understand that it's probably a good idea that they start to look under the hood? What is it that maybe they're feeling or seeing, or what is it that they need to know that makes them go, okay, this is worth looking into a little bit?
Yeah, and looking under the hood is really a good description about what this is. You get insight into a part of your physiology and physical and mental being that you're not really aware of, that we don't really have a good sense for. Because we have excellent eyesight, we have excellent hearing and taste and smell and sense of touch. And that is because historically, through all those millions of years, all the threats to our health and life came from the outside, from animals that were chasing us, or enemies, or poisonous, things in the nature, or foul food and such. But we never needed a sense for our inner stress levels, which is why I could have variation in heartbeat, for example, from 60 to 80, and I would not be able to feel that difference. But that difference would represent a huge difference in inflammation level and stress levels that we're not really equipped to feel. Because if we had felt that, historically, that would be in the way of the danger signals from the outside. So what kills us now is like high blood sugar, inflammation, and, for example, high blood pressure. But we don't feel that. If I have a really high blood sugar, I don't feel anything, right? So, and maybe if we wait for another 5 million years, maybe there will be some pain signals from the high blood sugar, but we can't wait for that. So in the meantime, these monitors that I would call dashboards that will give this glimpse into what is under the hood is our best way of sensing the stress levels, because it will be revealed in the heart rate.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things I found, doctor, is there are two reasons people make a change in their life. They hurt enough that they have to, or they learn enough that they want to. And it's the unfortunate circumstance that we often wait until there's a fire to make a change. We have the heart attack before we start taking care of ourselves, or we lose a loved one before we start to be really grateful for what we have. And so my goal is to help us learn enough that we want to change. So have you found that there's anything that you have shared with your clients or your patients that has really truly hammered home this idea that if they don't start to make a change in their stress levels, that it's going to negatively affect their health and their quality of life?
I think what is important to know is that the diseases that kill us, like heart disease, like dementia, like metabolic syndrome, like cancer, often it will have been something going on in your body for 20 or 10, 20, 30 years before that. So it didn't start when you get the diagnosis. And this is why it's important to start to change your lifestyle before you have to. When you have to, when there has been a diagnosis, it's often too late. Then it's just the final signal for a process that have been going on for a long, long time. And by checking out your heart rate, you can go in and see that my heart rate variability and my stress level will lead me into these inflammation-based diseases. And you will be able to change that before you have to. Because I live as a general practitioner and a doctor from people that often don't change even if they have to. So I hope that your listeners will be able to think that, okay, I want to avoid getting these diseases and I need to do something now and not wait until I get sick, because then it's too late very often. You can, of course, do a lot even when you get the diagnosis. You can reverse many of these diseases, but it's way better to prevent it.
Yeah. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today, right?
That's right. That's right. And I had to do this, and I'm writing about it in the book because my father died at 73, and I could see from my ancestry on my heritage, the ancestry website, that I'm not getting anything for free from my ancestors. They were all dying at 70, somewhere around there. So I just had to then look around and to find out how can I live longer than 73 or 75 or 78. I wanted to be 90 and still be vital. And then I had to do sort of the medical study 2.0 on my leisure time, because we didn't really learn in medical school how to avoid getting sick. We didn't learn how to create health. So then I had to learn everything that I'm talking about in the Pulse Cure. So the Pulse Cure is really how to improve your sleep, how to improve your movement and exercise, how to improve your diet, how to improve your ways of mitigating stress to, like breath work and cold water therapy and so on. So trying to find the best strategies in each of these fields that makes it possible for you to live longer. And of course, you're probably familiar with the blue zones. Yeah. So that is the places in the world where people live the longest. And they are doing pretty much the same things. Being active, having good relationships, sleeping, being out under the sun. And many of these things can keep you healthy. And the good thing about them is that they are free. So what is expensive is to get sick, right? So all the money is waiting until people get sick and then treat them with not so efficient therapies. So that seems unfortunately to be the conscious or deliberate or not deliberate forces behind it. But it's what is happening. And all the advice that I give in the Pulse Cure that can help you minimize the chances of getting sick of these lifestyle diseases, they are free. It's free to move. It's free to sleep more. It's free to meditate or go for a run. Being outside in nature is free. Breath work, of course, is free. Cold water, having a cold shower is free. And it's not necessarily more expensive to eat real food compared to ultra processed food or the junk food.
Yeah. I would say it's harder to eat the quantity that we are now eating of whole foods, but typically what we find is when you buy whole foods, you also are eating less quantity because you're getting more nutrients and you don't need as much food. But there's a lot of research showing that we're just eating a lot of food. Processed carbohydrates are very good at making us more hungry, not less hungry. And so there's all of that to be said. I also, you touched on something that I really think is important for my listeners to hear, because I hear a lot of flack about the medical system and how it's quote unquote broken or whatever. And I have a lot of friends who are doctors. And one of the struggles that I have with that is that doctors, I sometimes ask, how much nutritional education do doctors get, do you think? And people, they'll get all sorts of numbers, and I'll say almost none, right? Enough to know how it might affect the medicines that they're providing. But the problem is that the medical field wasn't designed to help you live a healthier lifestyle. It was to save you when you were dying. I mean, that was really what it was about. We lived a healthy lifestyle on our own because we were physically active all the time. We worked for the food that we had, and we lived healthier lives, and doctors came in to save you. It was the same analogy as a lifeguard versus a swim coach, right? Like a lifeguard is there to save your life. They're not there to teach you how to swim. And a doctor is a lifeguard. But if you needed to learn how to swim, you probably needed that a long time ago before you started drowning in the pool. And that was a swim coach. And so there's this shift that you're mentioning, that, which I think is an important one, where the medical field is starting to recognize. I think it's more, you can correct me if I'm wrong because you're in it, I think it's more individuals who are saying, as doctors, who are saying we're not doing it right, and we need to help people better before they get to this point, as opposed to the system in general. Because you're right. Well, for one, it's hard to move the Titanic versus a speedboat. So it's really hard to shift an entire system of the medical field versus individuals saying, I'm going to do it a different way. But I think there is a shift happening where doctors are starting to recognize, hey, we can help people before they get super sick. And I think that's important.
Absolutely. I think there's much more awareness about this now than it was maybe only 10 years ago. So the problem is that the whole medical system works downstreams from disease and not upstreams. So we need to identify people 10, 15 years, whether they have the risk factors of getting sick. And I think even medical school didn't really think that, and that is why I did everything wrong. So everything that I give advice on in the book, I did wrong. I was drinking a couple of glasses of wine every day. I was eating crap food. I was not sleeping enough, stressing too much, using some kind of nicotine that we use in Norway to put under our lips. So I was basically doing everything wrong. And the reason for that is that we didn't, as doctors, think that it mattered so much. Maybe if you had the ideal lifestyle that could give you 3 to 5 extra years, but it would take you 3 to 5 years to do that, with exercise and extra sleep and making food from the bottom up. So why bother? There was kind of nothing to gain. Now we know that this is not right, that we can gain like 2 decades of extra healthy life even. So there's so much more to gain than we thought. But of course, the medical books, the textbooks are still based on the knowledge from 30, 40 years ago. I've looked them over recently because I was writing a book on the vagus nerve and I wanted to go to the bookstore to see if the textbooks look different now, but it looks almost exactly the same as I was reading 30 or 40 years ago. So it takes a long time to get these changes into the textbooks, really. Of course, 40, 50 years ago, the lifestyle wasn't that different. People were having to move to be social. They were not just sitting at their iPhones or iPads on Zoom to meet. The lifestyle in general was probably a lot healthier 30, 40 years ago than it is now. So for so many people, the lifestyle is just like horrible. Eating crap food, not moving enough, not sleeping enough, being grossly overweight, being exposed to toxins that is hard to get away from, being too comfortable. So there are a lot of, problems that we have to overcome to live a healthier life. And what these technologies shows us by tracking the heart rate is that whatever we do that looks more like the lifestyle we used to have 10,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago is healthy for us. Being social, being together, being outside in nature, sleeping 7 to 8 hours when it's dark, eating food that our system can recognize as food and will not react to, avoiding alcohol, being able to rest more of the day. So this is things that looks a bit more like the lifestyle of our ancestors, the kind of Stone Age lifestyle, so to say. And then many people say, why would that be good? They lived like 40 years, their life expectancy, but that was because of the high child mortality. There's research in the US from the First Nation indigenous people from around the century, not the last century, but before that, like 120 years ago, I think. And it showed that they had almost 100 times more centenarians than in the immigrants. And they could hardly find cancer, for example. So the lifestyle, the natural lifestyle, be really beneficial for our health as well. And now, of course, that we have great healthcare system if we get sick, and if we could then implement this kind of ancient lifestyle or parts of it to stay healthy, that would be a great combination.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I laugh too at the argument of like, oh well, back then the average lifespan was only 40 years. It's like, well, back then we didn't wash our hands after we, after we were playing out in the dirt and things like that. Like we've learned some things before that, but it's not. That's the piece that we should be having doctors help us with. We fall and break our leg, or we have a very severe virus, or things like that. Those are the things, the unpreventables versus the preventable issues that we need to continue to think about. I also read in your book, you made that argument, which I think is so hilarious. It used to be that doctors thought so you could get 3 to 5 years back on your life if you exercised and dieted and did the right things, but it would take you 3 to 5 years to do all those things, exercise, cook good foods and things. So it was kind of a wash, right? That was the argument. My thought was, even if it didn't really add many years to the end of your life, which is really what we're talking about in that situation, the tit for tat kind of thing. My argument is always, because other people will use the same argument, well, I'm going to die one day, I might as well enjoy it. It's like, yeah, but every day before that, you're going to live. And if you continue to live the life the way you're currently living, you're not going to be happy about it. You're not enjoying the quality of life now. So it's not really, in my opinion, it's not really about adding 3 to 5 years to the end of your life, because we never know when that is. It's about, I enjoy the quality of life that I have now. And we have to ask ourselves, is the extra, slice of pizza, and don't get me wrong, I love pizza, right? But is the extra slice, or is the high levels of stress, or all of these things really benefiting us to the point where it's worth the rest of our lives not being as healthy as it could be?
Yeah, and what I feel is that the strategies in the post cure is not only increasing the chances of living a longer, healthier life, but it also provides more well being in the moment. I feel better. I feel I have more energy now than 15 years ago. So it's also a matter of well being in the moment. And you have to invest a little bit. I think that you should invest maybe 1 hour a day for doing something healthy, either if you're exercising or making a nutritious meal or having a nap or taking some time to do breath work or meditation or read a book with some knowledge, that you do something every day to invest in a better.
Yeah, I love that. So I want to touch a little bit towards, with the time that we have remaining. One, I'll share some of the things, the insights that I had with reading my watch, but I want to hear a little bit more too about your recommendations for how people can start to use these tools, what tools people have available to them, because a lot of people are walking around with data on their wrist right now and have no idea how to use it. And then the last thing I'd really love to wrap up with for the show is, what can people start to do, especially for people like who listen to this show who are very quote unquote busy people, they're high achievers, they always have things going on. What can they start to use now that, okay, they're looking at the data, they're seeing all the things, what can they start to implement to benefit themselves? So the first thing that I really noticed, doctor, was that I drain very, very quickly. My wife and I, we both have Garmins. And so we use the feature, the body battery, which basically takes the HRV and turns it into some sort of, percentage number. And as you mentioned in the book, it starts at 100, or the highest it can go is 100, and the lowest it can go is 5. And so my wife and I always kind of joke that I run very, very quickly, very fast. As soon as I wake up, I'm on and I'm going mentally and physically, where she takes a little bit longer to go. And then at the end of the day, I am spent, I am exhausted. And up until the time when we actually had the watches to track this, I didn't really know what was going on, but this started to give me a good indication. So I found I can get up to, after a good night's sleep, and I very much value sleep. We have good sleep hygiene. It's 66 in the room. It's dark blackout lights. There's white noise going, all the whole 9 yards. We do no screens an hour before dead time, the whole thing. I can usually get up somewhere in the realm of 90 to 95. And by the end of the day, I am definitely at 10 to 5 every single day. I'm usually losing 10 points in the first hour that I'm awake, and all I'm doing is journaling, stretching maybe just a little bit, and reading a book. That's usually what I do the first hour. And then I'll drink a cup of coffee or a cup of matcha tea or something like that. I want to ask you here in a minute about caffeine intake and its effects, because I can definitely tell that it's having an effect on me. But that was something that really helped me. My wife, not a great sleeper. She usually gets up to 60 or to 70 is a good night of sleep for her body battery. But then she drains to maybe 30 by the end of the day. So she's only losing 30 points in the entire day. She's a little bit more carefree and relaxed than I am. I'm the stressor of the two in the family. So it was just really interesting to see the drastic dynamics just in terms of how we live our lives and how we go about our day to day.
Yeah, and that is what's interesting for couples or families, with children also, that you can compare the same day, how it affects you very, very differently. And then to see, okay, what can you do about it? How will your day be if you put in some small micro breaks of breath work, for example? How will that affect your day? Will you end up, because I advise in the book to have more than 80 in the morning in body battery and not less than 20 in the evening most of the days. And because you say you feel exhausted by the evening, and then maybe just adding some micro breaks of meditation, of breath works, maybe just a minute 5 times a day or so, that could make that you are not so exhausted in the evening, right? So that would be something to advise, I think.
Absolutely. Is that professional medical advice?
Yeah, absolutely. My
I
my
love it.
my book that I wrote, released in Norway, is already a bestseller here in Norway this year, is about the rest cure, on how to be better at resting, taking those
Ah,
10 pages out of the out of the pulse cure and making a whole book about it,
okay.
because people find it hard to rest. It takes some effort to rest, paradoxically. So that would be a good thing. It's good for you that you are sleeping so well that you can recharge so much overnight. And I would guess that this is because you may have a superior VO2 max compared to your wife. That you have a good, I would guess your VO2 max is probably 50 or so.
Let's find out. I have that number on here. Yeah, it's 48.
48, yeah, it's close to 50.
I haven't been
Yeah,
training very much, so that's
yeah,
probably
yeah. So somewhere around 50,
yeah.
which is a really good number, which means that your system is recovering faster. And once you are asleep, it will work at a low RPM, so to speak. So you will rest very efficiently because of that. So maybe your wife does not have the same VO2 max, so maybe she will not recover as well during the night. So maybe she could try to find some strategies to improve the sleep, for example.
Oh,
See if she can end her last meal a bit earlier, or yeah, see if there are some of the strategies in the pulse cure that can help
yeah,
for
yeah.
better sleep at night. But that she's able to not go so far down in the evening, does she also have more energy than you in the evening, or is she also exhausted, or?
No, she
Yeah.
lasts a lot longer. So what I find is especially if I have caffeine in the mix, I burn out very quickly. So by about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, now granted, I get up at 5 a.m. So I mean, there's like people also have to recognize like there's a limit no matter what, right? Like you can't get up at 4 a.m., go to bed at 10 p.m., work as hard as you can all day. Like you mentioned that earlier. Rest is something that we as a society, especially in the Western culture, we demonize. Like, oh, you took a nap today, must be nice. Like that whole sentiment of like rest is not an okay thing. So I do recognize like I get up early, so it's reasonable that I should be tired at 8 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock at night for sure. But usually by 4, I'm pretty well dead to the world, and so that's something that I need to get better at for sure. Because I think caffeine, correct me if I'm wrong, caffeine can definitely have a part to play in terms of getting your body
It,
stressed quickly and draining it. Or tell me more.
it could have, but not necessarily. For me, I don't see much of a difference. Depends on at which time you have your caffeine and how many cups. How many cups do you drink?
Usually 3 or 4.
3 and 4. That should be
Throughout
good
throughout
once
the day.
you stop the last one at noon, for
Okay.
example.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's something I've tried before. I'll definitely try that too. And I've recently heard on the Mel Robbins podcast of all things. I follow her because she's a fellow podcaster. And this idea that caffeine can raise your stress cortisols higher on an empty stomach, so you want to drink water before you drink coffee. So trying to drink a glass of water before your first cup of coffee can be helpful.
Yeah, that could be helpful, and wait 1.5 hour after you get up to let your natural cortisol do its job and not add something to that. So that could be one strategy.
Yeah.
Absolutely. and
Yeah.
maybe to have 1 cup with caffeine and 1 decaf, so that you have 4 cups of coffee, but half of them are decaf.
Yeah.
These
Yeah.
things. And the good thing then with Garmin is that you can see the changes, so you can navigate, where it's much harder to just do the guesswork. So that's the luxury of the Garmin watches. And you said which tools to use, and then
Yes,
I
please.
think that the cheapest and most accessible and easiest would be the Garmin watch. Absolutely. You would get a really good one down to $250. Buy it secondhand, of course, even cheaper than that. While I think both the Whoop Band and the Oura Ring would be more expensive than that. But many people, probably more than half of your listeners, would already have a smartwatch of
Mm.
some kind on the wrist. And most of the watches will have some way of measuring heart rate variability overnight, and maybe also the sleep quality. And you have a lot of information just in those measurements there. But to get the micromanaging of the stress levels that I describe in the Pulse Cure, then Garmin is really the best tool for this.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned one of the things I really appreciated about your book was because I've had the Whoop, I've had the Garmin, I've had all sorts of different measurements for my stress and my levels and my fitness. And people like myself and the people who listen love data, but we don't always use it effectively. It's almost like we love to have it just to say we have it. But what I loved about your comment was like Whoop claims to be a really accurate tool. And don't get me wrong, it was very helpful for me. So for those who really like Whoop, stick with it. If you don't know what it is, check it out. It can be very helpful. It gives you some pretty cool information. But the challenge is there's no screen on it. There's no way to effectively see it happening in real time unless you have your phone out. And so it's really hard to use that data to make decisions throughout your day, like you suggest in the book. So I found that the body battery for Garmin was really, really helpful for
Yeah, absolutely. And also that you can just push a button and see the stress level in the moment. Because then suddenly you find yourself in a meeting and the stress level is high, and then you realize that, and then you do some breath work and slow down your breathing, or do some strategies like mindfulness, or, just trying to calm yourself down once you see that your stress level is high. And other times you suddenly realize that the stress level is high, you don't understand why, and then you see, okay, what was I eating, 1 hour ago, or and those kind of things. So you're able to micromanage and see the stress levels in the moment and then throughout the day. And I would also encourage people to try to guess what you will see when you measure the stress levels before you check it. That makes it then easier to be able to sense your body. And a lot of people often fear before they start using it will be too stressful. And I find that most people think it's more like a gamification, that
it.
is kind of a game and you think it's fun and interesting. But you also have to not be too obsessed about it. But often you will be, because suddenly you get insights to what is under the hood
Mm.
and is new to you. So it's just like when you were driving, getting your driver's license, in the beginning, you pay attention to everything. You don't really remember to give way to the right side or the left side, or check the mirrors in the right way. And then after a while, it becomes second nature. And this is the same, I think, with this. Are you stressed by what you see on your watch? Do you look at it all the time?
No, in fact,
No.
I think that was one of the most insightful things from your book that I've said. I've said insightful like 17 times on this show, but it was so insightful. And one of the things that I really appreciated, because I'm always teaching people how to calm down and de-stress, meditation, mindfulness, using exercise, all those things. But it wasn't so apparent to me how different everybody is in terms of what works and what doesn't. And in your book, I thought it was really neat that you shared so many different testimonials of what people learned through going through this process. And so I remember distinctly one person. It didn't impact me very much at the time, but afterwards, when I started to track myself and my body battery, it definitely rang home. And they said basically nothing that I do in terms of practices helps me other than just stopping and laying down and not doing anything. And I was almost like doubtful of them. I'm like, nothing works? Really? Like, you can't do anything that's going to help you de stress? And then I started tracking my own and I said, I'm that person. Nothing that I do, like mindfulness, meditation, slowing down, just standing up, puts me in the orange very quickly. I found that really the only thing I teach at a university, and when I have a guest speaker come in, and I sit and I listen, I see that stress level go down. But as soon as I'm up and walking and talking, I'm on. And so it's really hard for me. Now, I have a lot more work to do. And that's where I kind of go back to what your question, which is, does it stress me out? I like it because at the end of the day, what is the game is all about? Can you get less stress? Who wouldn't love to play that game and win?
Yeah, and when you win that game, also you perform better.
Mm.
Because many people think that, okay, as long as I'm in the executive mode, as long as I'm doing something, I'm productive. But when you go into the research behind who will be the more productive people, regardless of they are athletes or business people or artists or whatever, the ones that are always very deliberate about rest, they're also the highest performers. So they are deliberate about what they do, but also deliberate about how to rest and calm down. And when you calm down like that, you get into the brain mode, which is called the default mode network, which is the creative network. And this is why creative people, they are performing their best when they have a good balance between what they do and when they relax. That is often when you don't do anything, that's when the best ideas come. So you shouldn't really be guilty about resting. For so many people, it's the best way to perform. Like directors, movie directors like Woody Allen would be in the shower getting the ideas. People go for a drive and then you get the idea. So you are doing some routine work or relaxing, and that is when this default mode network is turned on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I talk about that a lot with my clients, with my students. We have to have periods of boredom and rest. If we're always constantly trying to, like a lot of my clients are always trying to optimize their time and try to stuff it full of all the different things. And don't get me wrong, I've also been there before in my day. And I still am a recovering optaholic, right? But this idea of we're always trying to make everything perfect and shove it in and read the book and listen to the podcast and do the thing. And yeah, the most successful people recognize that there's times of boredom and those times of rest and recovery are where true insights come from, true creativity, and sometimes just the energy to be able to get back up and do it again the next day.
Yeah, it's like when nothing happens, then everything can happen, right? So it's a paradox.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I got to hear now because I was not familiar yet with the Rest Cure, which now I have another book to add to my list of books.
It's not out in English yet, or
Okay.
I'm not
Well,
even
then
sure if it will be. So it
I
would be
might have
nice.
to I might have to learn Norwegian then. So can you give us a little, even if it's not coming out, I still think people would be really helpful. So let's pretend somebody who's listening said, okay, fine, I'm going to get my Garmin. I'm going to start paying attention to the body battery. Oh my gosh, it drains so much. I'm stressed all the time. I never have energy. I'm going to start to do some of these things. What are some of the bigger things that you would recommend to them? And we've talked already that everybody's different, so they'd have to test it for themselves. But what are some of the bigger things that you're telling people to help them get out of that stressful mode so that they can be more productive and perform better?
Yeah. So the bigger things are the small things.
Yes.
So it is the easy things. It's just close your eyes, take 1 minute, close your eyes, slow down your breath, listen for sounds, just calm down your system. And this is hacking the system because this ancient autonomic nervous system, when you close your eyes and you breathe slowly, that is biologic signals to your system that is calm outside. There cannot be a war going on. There cannot be any reason to stress. You're giving your body a signal that it's calm. And if you do that 5 times a day, 1 minute or 2 minutes, you've done a lot. And then if you see that you are really, really stressed, just lie down, put your feet high, lie down, close your eyes, 10 minutes, and it will be work wonders. These small things, it doesn't really need to be very complicated. So the easy does it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what's important for people, especially people listening, is because the first thing they're going to say is, yeah, right, BS, 10-minute naps ain't going to do anything for me. I'm that one special person who can't relax, who this isn't going to work on. I implore them, I challenge them, in fact, because those are the people that are listening right now. I challenge them to get a watch, start tracking using the body battery, and prove it to themselves, because you may think that it's not going to work on you, but the battery doesn't lie, right? The body doesn't lie. It will show you that these small things, when you implement them for a longer period of time, 1 minute of breathing isn't going to necessarily completely turn you into a Jedi Master, but it can definitely help you, if you consistently apply it, to start to see some dramatic changes in your life. So I think it's important that people recognize that you have to be able to see the changes, and that something like this tool that measures HRV can help you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. You get this insight into what is under the hood. So, but of course, it's it will only tell how your fundamental nervous system and physiology works. So you can still have bad thoughts or being uncomfortable or being unhappy, but it shows you how your basic physiology and nervous system works. And when you get that into order, it's much easier to make our prefrontal cortex, our advanced human brain, to work. So often, if you are depressed, if you are having stress-related problems, when you go into this system and optimize your autonomic nervous system and stress balance, other things fall into place.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. I really appreciate it. Dr. Torkil Færø, author of The Pulse Cure. A, where can they go for the book? And B, where should they go if they want to learn more from you or about this subject?
Yeah, they can buy the book anywhere. Where did you buy it?
I got this copy on Amazon, and then I
Amazon,
listened
right?
to it. Yep,
Yeah.
and then Spotify.
Yeah. Yeah, or you can have it on your iPhone, or it's an audiobook that you will get where you get other audiobooks. And on Instagram, I'm Dr. Torkil, or dr.torkil. I also have, but that is also somewhat Norwegian speaking, but I also have one doc_Torkil. That will be more the English Instagram. Not so many people there, but I will put out more English speaking content there.
I love that.
And I also have a website called thepulsecure.com, where I have a video lecture where you can see what I'm talking about with graphs and everything about the Garmin watch.
Love it. I love it. I talk about human performance all the time, and all of us stress, good, bad, and indifferent. This book, even though I knew so much about stress, I didn't know enough. And this book truly helped me not only understand it, but also help me change the way that I manage it. So from the bottom of my heart, and those that are listening, thank you so much for the work that you do. You are appreciated.
Thank you, Lucas. Very, very nice that you also took the time to read the book and listen to it. And so useful also that you had a Garmin watch so that we could discuss that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And you make it a great day. I don't know about you, but a phenomenal episode in my mind in terms of how do we start to manage our stress in a successful way. We're going to have it, but how do we change the way that we live, the way that we work, the rest that we take so that it's actually productive in terms of reducing stress and increasing our performance and overall well-being? I know that those insights like large amounts of food, which was proven in Eastern culture to actually be a problem many, many, many moons ago, is so insightful to help me better understand how to manage the things that I'm doing in my day that help me recognize how I can reduce stress. And also the drastic difference in the way that we stress throughout the day. I burn hot and fast, and so I drain very quickly, and I have to recognize that. But that is what allows me the opportunity to make decisions on how to structure my day so that I'm at my best self when it matters the most. So if you love this episode with Dr. Torkil Færø, please, please, please check out his book, The Pulse Cure. You can buy it literally anywhere, or you look him up online, anywhere that you want to find him. Thepulsecure.com is a great place to start. Check it out on Amazon, on Spotify, wherever. And if you like this episode, make sure that you subscribe on YouTube or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts so that you have the opportunity to check out all of our latest episodes and learn more about what it takes to optimize your well-being for higher levels of performance so you can continue to be the awesome high achiever that you are. Make it a great day.